Monolith, the crown jewel of 2016. Named after the monolith in 2001 A Space Odyssey, this computer was one of the few things that actually went right for me in that lousy year. Powered by a Skylake-era i7 and a GTX 1060, it was the best multi-purpose all-in-one tower I had ever built. Video editing, gaming, multimedia, this thing could handle it. Even efficiency, dropping down to near laptop levels of power consumption when not doing anything heavy-duty. And having been smart with watching prices, I was able to get all of this without breaking the bank. There was only one problem. For the first time ever in my life, I had finally built a computer that was too fast. The wacky world of MultimediaJay. Grand Theft Auto Vice City is an awesome game. I would even go so far as to call it a classic. This game sparked an 80s renaissance when I was in college, and if you had this game on PS2 when it came out, you were the cool dude on campus. Many years before Twitch, Grand Theft Auto Vice City on PlayStation 2 introduced me to the idea that watching one of your friends play a video game could be just as much fun as playing it yourself. Unfortunately for us PC gamers, we were stuck waiting for the PC port of Vice City to come out, but we at least had some fun modding the heck out of Grand Theft Auto 3 on PC to try and fill in the gap. The PC port of Vice City was pretty fun and fixed some of the bugs that were present in the PlayStation 2 version, but unfortunately, the PC version of Vice City also introduced me to lousy PC ports. Whereas GTA 3 at least had a patch 1.1, the only patch that was ever officially released for GTA Vice City PC was a fix for graphical corruption, and that was it. The biggest issue I encountered in the game itself that should have been patched is that the frame sync and frame limiter from GTA 3 had been combined into a single frame limiter option in Vice City on the PC. It was all or nothing in terms of being locked at 30 frames per second like your PlayStation 2 buddies, or doing things all out and running the risk of glitches because the frames were just coming a little too fast. Not since real mode gaming in the DOS days had PC gamers encountered bad game experiences from their computers being too fast. Even on the single-core systems of the early 2000s, having a system that was a little too powerful could glitch out your game. On today's hardware, those problems are exponentially bigger. In this game's original heyday, texture poppin' and object poppin' were the biggest things I had to worry about. Nowadays, though, on today's hardware, Grand Theft Auto Vice City was essentially Grand Theft Auto Glitched City. Cars inching forward and stopping and sometimes going in reverse, Tommy Vercetti being stuck to the ground if he leaped out of his car, cars that handled like they were super glued to the road, and all kinds of camera glitches defined the Vice City experience on today's computers. C'est la vie when you have machines with multi-core and hyper-threading that can run this game at hundreds of frames per second. Indeed, Grand Theft Auto Vice City had turned into this generation's Quake 3 arena with the 3-digit frames per second. But the question still nagged away at me. On today's hardware, how can one have an authentic Vice City experience with the PC version of this game? It was then that I decided for the first time ever to try and make my computer's FPS go down. First, I tried enabling super sampling on the graphics card and then jacking the game all the way up to 4K. But even with everything cranked all the way up to 4K, the frame rate was too darn high. I began to reminisce on the glory days of Grand Theft Auto 3 when the frame limiter and frame sync were two separate things, so I went back and tried Grand Theft Auto 3 again, only to find out the original frame sync wouldn't work either. So even if you kept the frame sync on but the frame limiter off, you would have the exact same glitchy experience in GTA 3. It was then that I began to despair. How could I, with mid-2010s high-end hardware, be having such trouble with games that had recently received 10-year anniversary releases on mobile devices like tablets? It was then that it finally occurred to me just what it would take to get this machine to properly recreate the Grand Theft Auto early 2000s experience. Of course, it all made sense now. Power Saver mode. Assassinator of frame rates in newer games on both this machine and its predecessor. Why didn't I think of that earlier? It made all the sense in the world, too. Vice City was a tablet game nowadays, and I had long joked about how Power Saver mode on the 6700K was basically tablet mode, as if this big computer was pretending to be a tablet. The power draw was quite interesting as well. First time I had ever seen Monolith run a game at less than 100 watts full blast. But while I thought that 75 watts while running a game full blast was something to celebrate, there was another contender of a machine that idled at 10 watts that I was even more curious about in terms of how well that machine would handle this game. The Turd Shiva, the Toshiba laptop that I'd had such a love-hate relationship with over the last few years. This clunker of a laptop served mostly as a nerdy bedroom TV for me to watch YouTube on while drifting off to sleep. It reminded me of a cartoon jalopy seen in old cartoons where it would drive down the street and nuts and bolts would randomly fly out of it. Despite its clunkiness though, this machine was still powered by a Mullins-era AMD A8 APU circa 2015, and I had already taken it for a spin on a trip to New York on business in 2015 to see how well it would work as an AMD APU console on the go. The idea of non-gaming laptops serving as console killers was a perennial curiosity of mine and had me very much keeping an eye on the upcoming launch of AMD Raven Ridge for my next laptop. But with how old this game was, exactly how well could this laptop serve as a console on the go with Vice City? And what kind of wattage would we be looking at? Unfortunately, I found out very quickly that the substantially more lightweight processor completely choked when trying to record 1080p footage and play the game at the same time, so I had to revert back to camcorder Let's Play mode for this one. As expected, the Turd Shiva handled the game like a champ, keeping the frame rate at above console levels but not too high. I had also found out while setting up this setup, of course, that the frame rate actually was tied to the friction in some of the physics in this game, so the ideal frame rate was actually around 50 or so. But if someone could keep the game in the 30 to 60 range, they would get the best results, while still staying ahead of what the consoles did back in this game's day. I then checked the power draw, 20s for running this game full blast, which actually left Monolith in the dust, but didn't quite approach the 10 to 20 watt range that I traditionally see from the PlayStation 2 Slim. Regardless, this game is running in 1080p and only drawing 20-something watts. That, in and of itself, was enough of an accomplishment. There was not a doubt in my mind that the Turd Shiva could console kill the PlayStation 2, but I wasn't done with Monolith just yet. There was one more thing to try. It occurred to me that rather than swap computers or look for FPS limiting mods, Windows 10 had a built-in feature to limit the maximum processor state. So why not create a power plan that limited the processor to something that would CPU limit Vice City to get it to run at a decent frame rate? So I made a power plan that dropped everything down to 25%. The results told me that this was the best idea yet. Rather than fret about whether power saver mode would save too much power, so to speak, I could make power plans corresponding to various processor maximums to go along with what various games require if there are other games that are coded like this that'll glitch out if the frame rate's too high. The stage was set, we had our contenders, and it was time for a showdown. It's time for the hard numbers. I've long been familiar with the cliché about something being right under your nose, but I never would have guessed that it ever would have happened with something like this. Here I was, trying to get an early 2000s game to run on mid-2010s hardware, and tearing apart what's left of the modding sites that are still out there for this game to try and find a mod that would bring the frame rate down to levels where the game wouldn't glitch out, and the answer turns out to be a built-in feature in Windows 10. This non-luck is why I don't go to the casino, but it's great to know this now, and I'm curious what else I can do with these custom power plans now that I know that such a thing can be so effective. Regardless, those answers are best left for another day. I'm Jay Silverton, aka MultimediaJay. Thanks for watching, thanks for stopping by, and good night.